teaching at least something understanding about Buddhism?
Yeah, I learn Buddhism and practice some meditation or follow.
So this starts Tangi main nashim tal Lobsang chirwa.
My name is Lobsang Wangyel.
And Lobsang Geshe tanda dil chirwa. That tanda ngi triki Geshe de kartam sha yusena nanchu dang tin ki da kitso se agi Geshe tingi te dam sha yo.
Namse Tankari.
Tin ki kitso ta modern society.
Okay, so my talk today is going to be on Buddhism and sort of Buddhism and modern society. So those two.
Ti da dam go karasa wayne. Da chidang gi Buddhism nanchu ki motonda nanchu ki nyamleng ki thoni tensan ki kitso ko nala dan chipi kanga sena mendu chi mi gi karsena samlo tamcho ko la ya ti si ya jin ro ya ta ten di pense pento yo in sa ti kala ani damai choji ti dam go yin se.
So the reason I'm talking about this, I chose this subject, is I think that there's an opportunity for this connection to help sort of improve people's way of thinking in society.
Kani ta nanchu se on di zamba chi manchi ya ji ki tanda ko at ti si an ja chimba malene gum jawa changba yam do samlo tang denge mambu yor ta ta ki chira la na jin da ari na de nanchu se di chi gum jawa changba ndo ji ma ji yan te la pa lojong chini jangar su lojong dirab lojong te mana ji chini lojong chini ro yo pa mi mambu ji tanda chi ko yo mares.
So as I was sort of saying earlier, right, many people when they think about Buddhism, really all they know or think about is this idea of meditation. And many people, when they think about Buddhism, they don't think about the sort of the study, the rigorous study that goes into actually understanding Buddhism.
Tak chi gum jawa da yang chi gumba nala ya shoshim cha ya yang domban de ya ndo endi zil samlo tangi wa na chu se on di.
Yeah, also often people will think about being inside a monastery or a temple and making offerings or chanting and these kinds of things as well.
Ta ti na chu re ti yem de na chu ke na ni ta chashi ke la le na chu ke chashi chi re ya chashi de chashi chembo ji ma yim be na chu ke chashi chunchu ji re. Ta ke ni.
Yeah. So if we look at Buddhism, really these kinds of things are really just a small part of Buddhism.
Ta ngar so ne na chu ngone de kar che go re sam go yo na chu la ani lo nyir chen ta tin re nga so tseri ba ki music injik te la ya karsena to chi nyabjong ro che gindo tin na ji chen nga so na chu sa to lo jong de sem ke ten la lo jong che ya de sem ke ne pop ta sem ke ta mi sa la ta ba ti go lo jong che ya.
So when really Buddhism, to really understand Buddhism, or really what Buddhism really is this really deep study. It's a way of really studying, studying the mind, we can say. So in the same way that science and Western sciences study the world, right? We can say that Buddhism really is this deep study of the mind.
Tindi sanda na chu za de be lo jong che lo jong ki chani ja che yo yim mi ji ga da ngaran de na mi lo ni tang ro lo jong che sha yo ina tan na sa gi yo ma ta ja chim bo wa ya ani ta ti lo jong che yo rim ji ro ta ti lo jong che chi ba ma yim ba de lo jong che su su sem ga la su ja ni nyam lin chen ta me se chi le me se nyam dia lo jong da nyam den ro ga ta rim ji re na chu za ti lo jong che ani nyam lin chi ti katora me ba answer ba la nyam ro.
So I, for example, have studied Buddhism, very seriously for 25 years, for most of my life. But I, haven't even come. Why does it say turn up the volume? I don't know why it says that. I have not, of course, come anywhere near finishing studying all of Buddhism. Right, there's an incredible amount to study. But really, it's not just studying. When you want to study Buddhism, you also have to practice Buddhism. So the study of Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism, have to go hand in hand, because really what you're trying to do is change your mind, is to improve your mind. So you need both study and practice together, working together to really change your mind.
Ta tigi ta jachembo ki tanda na ba sanju bi chuse pa jachena tini jachembo jiri de su deni sheba yana ta tawa tenjong sa de kyoban sira me ba sa ni su ni gna de de yore su chena tsi ni tanda jiri tanda.
So, of course, what we're talking about is really this very vast study of Buddhism and this very detailed aspect. If we wanted to pare it down to some very simple words, Hello, Taruna. Welcome. Hope you can hear us. Probably you can hear us. So if we were going to really just state very, very simply what is Buddhism, then we can state it as two things. We can state it as this view of dependent arising or view of dependent origination, and the view of and non-violent conduct or non-harming conduct. Come in, please come in. Oh, there's probably still some. We're having a little electrical problem, so there's not as much hot water as we normally have, but I suspect there's still enough for you guys to have some if you want. If you would like some tea or coffee, or just hot water, there's water in that thermos back there. Welcome. So just to catch you up, we've just started the presentation. Geshe said that he's going to give a brief introduction to sort of Buddha. Is there someone else out there? Okay, I will wait. No. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Come in, please have a seat. If you would like hot water or tea or coffee, we have. Geshe, we just started a few minutes ago. Geshe, the topic is Buddhism in the modern era. The idea being that we think that there are many things in Buddhism that people can study and practice that will help improve people's minds, and help improve the situation. And then we were talking a bit about what is Buddhism, that many people think about Buddhism simply as just sort of meditation, or often people think of maybe just like rituals and making offerings and these kinds of things in temples. But really Buddhism requires, to truly understand Buddhism requires lots of study. The Geshe Wangyel here, of course, studied Buddhism. He's a Geshe Lharampa. He studied Buddhism for 25 years in the great monasteries. And even in all of that time, he did not master or study, I'll switch back to first person. I did not master or study all of the incredible, the amount of studying you can do in Buddhism. But Buddhism is not simply just studying too, you also have to practice. So the goal of Buddhism is to transform one's mind. So as you're doing the studying, ideally you're studying and practicing together to work on changing your mind. That's basically where we got to.
Tawa temjong Japan tsame ba song di zamba tawa temjong digi Japan tsame ba de condition de gore Japan tsame ba za de condition yong gore se ga dutje lana ta jumse de ma to tawa temjong ra ba tawa temjong gore ta ja chim bon shi ja gu yore ti ge temjong digi ma to Japan tsame ba ze de mi jambala ani samba sambo che gu yore wa da so tin la so bi ge ta su su mi ge gyo ba ji ro ti ka de na jumse de tawa temjong im be ge dutje ta teni tin ma to Japan tsame ba de gore se gu yore.
And so we said that the Buddhism is this incredibly vast field of study, but if we boiled it down to 2 points, we would say those 2 points are the view of dependent arising or interdependence and nonviolent or non-harming conduct. And when we talk about these 2 points, we can sort of think about where does this idea of non-harming, sort of non-violent conduct come from? Well, it actually comes from this view of interdependence or dependent arising, right? So when we talk about this view of non-violence or view of non-harming conduct, it's how you act, it's your actions, it's your deeds, it's having compassion and not wanting to hurt people or any sentient being. But that actually comes from this view of interdependence.
That tin dreshe jawa ke tondo tab debo china that demba she se ade namba ke tab debo yamba cha de yore. Tin san tan da demba she se ade sanji chodon de krong ya san jebi ani chu thoma de kara song yore sena demba she se ade ma song sha yore. Demba she se ade ta ta ki tawa tin jong de kyoban sa ma ba kare yong gu yobi ke tripchi tab debo jodan ribi gangam sha sheni mi ke ane ngar sun jik te mi ke shi tab debo shi se kalo ta mozin saba is understand ja ti ki che da demba shi.
So when the Buddha first achieved enlightenment, first achieved Buddhahood, the first thing he taught was the Four Noble Truths, right? And the Four Noble Truths are very sort of easy to understand way to understand. You could say that they're related to this view of dependent arising and this view of nonviolent conduct, and that they're very sort of concise and structured and easy to understand way to encapsulate his whole idea, this whole path to liberation.
So karana shini shani sungu yore zana chini ene namba sanji begi chujong gen drepshe yon zoba titani jap tani chu sungu yore nini sanji korong ya ta kiu tama manga so na jinji 거 도망가서 나진지 다 람냐 세림발라 지네테나 딘딘 지난 딘이 중국도 다 아시아 람테나 가이 나오진 송버레스 딘딘 인사 그런 냠뇽 티샬라자비 마 송버레스 이 송요데 산지 가살롱지와 이 켈라 타빌라텐지 타바라라라 좀브리키 라스카르 송고요스나 니 치르톨라 타빌람데 땡기인다시 마나 저러나 땡기 셀람데 타티 tarpasina mandu namchike kombato to madu so rali giri madu ngi kiransu ya tindroaji dodala pa zimdro tindroaji yo mares ni choro okay
so the Four Noble Truths are not simply just this really nice sort of encapsulation of the past. Actually, what they are, as you can say, is that when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he spoke from his own experience. He was like, I was just I was a normal person. I was born and raised as a normal person. And this is the path I took to get where I am, right? So he's really telling you from his own experience how you can practice sort of step by step, and achieve, realization. How you can achieve liberation. How you can achieve Buddhahood. And you could just take in going since you kept another pentoki there, can you see me? Take it. Okay.
That's okay. Tati sonya de karsongyo da ngini chela tapilap tengi tabarang la gali tsumbrichi songyo ngi chela tabar tengi yores.
The other thing that the Buddha said was that you have to practice the path, right? The other thing in the Four Noble Truths is that you have to practice the path. I can't sort of physically pull you along the path or pull you up to liberation or Buddhahood.
Tindi la tene tatabingi chela tengi yesambe tombe ke ma chu sonya de pe jachimbo sonjari sangi pe chugon jatu ton la soba pe tamlam mi kita mi susuki kamda mi ba mendrawa yorwa mi kamda mi ba ramendra yore mi ke samson ramendra yore tela tumbi ke chyan ramana ji sonsha yore ro tangdon da ngidon songu yo tindi ki rimambu ji sonsha yore tindi soma de karchin songu yore tabilam tengu yore ta tengu yo insani sanji nge chena la songu yo ina nge ma sonsha ati tin drimari susuku ani namcho pe kitani nyalenge gores ani gino ta chutla tagi ni chola tabilam tungi yosawage tabilam de la mamboji tensha yos tabilam tangdon da nidun darchag kamda mupala tuni ta chude yan ramanaji sonsha yos wa tibadi jershangbe.
Okay. So of course the Buddha what the Buddha can't sort of pull us up to enlightenment. What the Buddha did is he taught us, he showed us the way, he told us the way to enlightenment, to liberation. And he did this, of course, through many, many teachings. There's many, many teachings, and there's many, many teachings because he taught to many, many different people with many different kinds of backgrounds, many different kinds of personalities, natures, and things. So he taught to the people he was teaching. He also gave a lot of teachings, and we can divide the teachings into often what's called interpretal and definitive, and there's sometimes a lot of argument about what is interpretal and definitive, but the idea being that some teachings the meaning can be understood directly. Some teachings you have to really sort of take the meaning and think about the meaning, maybe get to more of a subtler meaning.
Some sala sanji ki kanza ka da yor ta sin sungu yore some sala kanza ka da yo mari sungu yore te kar sungu yore sanji korongi manche ni son ko tablan ki ba ni ki samlo wala tubi gani ani tamki wo chini sungu yore se tindi ani son damanda wa chini ani chu damanda wa son sha yore.
So for example, like in some teachings the Buddha said that there is a person, like there is a substantially established person. Some teachings the Buddha says that the person, that self, that kind of self does not exist. And so why does he say these different things at different times? Well, this is we could say it's skillful means, right? He's teaching to the person what that person needs to hear at that time, right? So this is a method that he's teaching to help people.
That this song with Jilian Sanji Karsong Yuris and Gelon Takams, Gelon Senadang Traba Sanji Jiliji, Gelon Takams, Gelon Tatrawa Yanari, Gelon Yan Kiba, Min Kiba Yanari, Gelon Kin, the Sacher Dallas, and also said to so bad Dami on the Samba, Sa, Ches, said Sama Yama in the Senior Nitiki, Senior Hague, Senior Kabla, Senior Tangs yourself, said the Zumarindue, said the Munire, did that Che, Dur. Se yimai tawala tajiran basun chek do tina jin ni son sha de nge mal lak sha de demba yimai kyo ta ke che so ngala jim se zoni sanji chosen che se nge kal lak sha de jin rang go yo mal tin digin do mindu chor be sem kan dan sambo ji yimai ren do mindu te sambo ji re yo na tin nyale nyale ji mena shashana degree song yes.
So there's a very famous quote from the Buddha, and the quote says, "Oh, bhikshus and wise men." Bhikshus is the name for fully ordained monks. So, oh monastics, oh bhikshus and wise men, just as a goldsmith would test his gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing, so you must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence for me. So this is an example here of where he's using this idea of gold as an example, and something that's very valuable, so that you wouldn't just accept the gold. Somebody gave you the gold, said here it's gold, and you'd accept it. You would actually check it to make sure it is gold. So in this same way, you shouldn't just blindly accept the Buddha's teachings, just because you have faith in him or you revere him. You have to really take what he's teaching and think about it and try to understand it, and really check it, really verify that if you really truly believe it is, and and if you do, then you need to practice it. If you don't, then don't practice it. Go do something else.
Tandi inza da ngar zu sanji soma de la ani ta chi cha de la to ta rawan de cha de rawan cha de free cha ro o de cha yes.
Yeah, so then the Buddha is saying it's up to us, right? We have the choice. Do we want to engage with these teachings and check them or not? What we do is up to us.
Tani chochine ya ta chuli sanji namba yemai yin choyore sanji chuli lo ni chini susu campaign ji le ba yina tele yin jing namba ji ngwa yo ma les music susu go te ngala pembo ji re samna susu jala na ji chini peche ta na ndugi gore se te ya de sanji korong ta bonji te ma te sha yara.
So part of also what you can understand from this is that you don't have to be a Buddhist or call yourself a Buddhist or not, right? If you study these teachings and you find things that are beneficial to you, that help you have a happier life or improve your mind, then it's totally wonderful for you to just take the things that are beneficial to you from these teachings, right?
Ta teni chu song yong di zambala ta ki demba je sa de ma song yong di demba tangbo ni ki na lo le nga zo dunga kramba demba tangbo na dunga kramba chi tang dunga de kaw ni ki yo me ju kramba chi song sha yo re dunga de kar re tangbo dunga shi gor da dunga shi par cha si di kena dunga ngo zang gore dunga kar re se chu song yo re ti jili dunga chi yong yo na dunga de chi ge men jo tini ma yimba je kaw na ki ndu se ki ju ko chi song sha yo re.
So back to the Four Noble Truths. The first Noble Truth is what we call, also a point of translation, it's not the truths that are noble, it's actually the four truths for noble beings. So it's like the four truths for great beings, you could think of it that way, just anyway. And so the first of these truths is the truth of suffering, right? And so what we're talking about in the truth of suffering is that so we want to know what is suffering. What is the nature of suffering? What do we mean when we say suffering, right? What is suffering? What is this nature that we have that is always causing us suffering? And then once we sort of begin to understand what the nature of suffering is and sort of aspects of suffering, then we want to know, right, well, does suffering have a cause, right? Is there a cause or is there not a cause? And if there is a cause, what is the cause? That would be the second noble truth.
Tene karasungyo ta tamani de la karasungyo zona dingo zen savijikulu dingo te meba zo tu de te dingo te meba zo yongyo jirewe mengyo jirewe te ngoze te meba zo yongyo jire ma do sem katangi kangari na le luk kangari na meba zo yongyo jire ta meba zo ke tap karan du gundu si te lamden si temba tamade songyo tam dende jil temba ina so yobi dingo te ta meba zo tu re sini ni lamden se ade sombare si ta tamani tamboni te negative jimriche.
So when we look at the Four Noble Truths, it's organized into two pairs of cause and effect, right? So you have the suffering, the truth of suffering, or the suffering. Then you have the cause of suffering, and then you have the third noble truth, which is the cessation of suffering and the path to the cessation of suffering. So you have cause and effect, cause and effect. So the third noble truth, which we say is the cessation of suffering, is understanding, recognizing if there is a cause, can we get rid of suffering? What does it mean to get rid of suffering? What is the sort of nature of the absence of suffering, right? And then we look at that and we go, what is the cause of that? How can we get rid of suffering? So the cause of that is what we call the truth of the path, right? What is this path to freeing ourselves from suffering? So you have the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, which is two pairs of cause and effect.
다 딘디 그 등을 시험도 잠아야 등을 때려야 지 소소 그 zupola tembe physical dingar se ana boda ani similar tibi dungar rini shi yong yores te jere la ya pa rimba chena thara mambo chini ngu yores rimba mambo yong yordi ta teri nga so rapa chi tisume wa inza rapa yong chi chaji sheba yemba na ta zupo chani chi soso chetangi ne na chala so ba ta sem gu gani kangar yang chi soso ku chi gangni to travi ki dungar ro soso le chi soso chi mi ji da tandro ke dungar yora sem dungar teni ro ta ani zupola tembe dungar 아니 진내 나자라 소바 둥어리 유주라 티수 참마당 아주 둥어 단다시 둥어를 세야기 둥어 티난지 되기요스 이나 티수 둥어 라바드레지 참모 telea jumba mom shiayos.
So when we talk about suffering, like, we can look at suffering just really briefly, really roughly. We can divide suffering into suffering of mind and the suffering of the body. And of course, in Buddhism, we talk about suffering. There's many sort of different levels of suffering in terms of subtlety and grossness. Like there's very easy to understand subtlety, very easy to recognize suffering, and much more difficult to recognize suffering. And so, just to talk really about the not subtle, the easy to recognize suffering, what we would call gross suffering in English, is we could say of the body, we can think of just simply as like as illness and death, right? Very very easy to recognize types of suffering.
다 dungar tisa mongwa zen sabe chiku dungar tiki gyukwa nilegi yoresi di ta namba ki tu jete maripa seyate tu te yoresi ta neko kwe jeyang kontro ta nga ger ta soso chinze gyu tindi chala tembi ta ani karsana semgu dungar yungu re lena tembi dungar yungu yoresi ta thoma maripa seyate teli kyan ta jinyimongi docha je dan kontro nga ger tesu kortan reshi gyabu yoresi.
So when we talk about suffering or the cause of suffering, of course the subtlest, the deepest cause of suffering, we say, is ignorance, right? So ignorance is really the primary cause of suffering. But the direct cause of suffering, we would actually say, is more of these negative emotions, what we call afflictions, right? So jealousy, anger, hatred, craving, all of these things, these are more of the direct cause of suffering. But it's the ignorance, this not knowing and this misknowing in Buddhism, actually, it's like a misrepresenting of, when we say ignorance, that is the cause of the afflictions, and then the afflictions then cause our suffering.
Tati karchini ngaso dogo yori dopi giramba pa mepa zoya taki ngaso temdre songuyo kiban sea mepa tawa temjon do kiban sea mepa si tan ani tawa temjon sea ke temdre ke nabja sea pa tomba ni sea ro joro tiso chion de tanga so maripa sea ta docha so pa doya ke tabshina de songuyo.
So when we talked about when we talked at the beginning just about the sort of the two very sort of rough summary of Buddhism as dependent arising, or the view of interdependence and nonviolent conduct, right? Well, why is this view of interdependence so important? Why is this like the biggest, one of the sort of main summaries of Buddhism? It's because this view of interdependence, or this view of dependent arising, which we also can talk about as emptiness very roughly, right? This is really the antidote to this ignorance. This is really the way that we can get rid of this root cause of the afflictions, this ignorance. And so if you get rid of this root cause of the afflictions, this ignorance, then the afflictions don't arise, and then if the afflictions don't arise, the suffering doesn't arise.
Ta tendri ka nabja yapo te mashibala teni ani ngaso ko denze sena danze ze ati chibote leng yores te karachena temri ka nabja de shingi yo mare temri meshi soso chipurnze me chinze de shikchi bole yong gore soso chinze yo soso chinze te yong ade kar temri ka nabja mashibala teni yong yores.
So to add a little more detail to this view of dependent arising or emptiness, right? So what we talk about is often this self-grasping. So we have this sort of afflictive self-grasping that views ourself as being sort of very solid or concrete, right? And so that arises.
진진 세주와 티 거를 몸불래야데 그래서 템리 그 남자 마시 발라테 는 템리 마시와 인자
So that we have this afflictive self-grasping, we have this like overly reified view of the self. And so where does this come from? Well, this comes because we don't understand, we don't recognize this, what we're calling the view of interdependence, or the view of dependent arising. So which really we could say is just sort of the way things truly exist. So it's like not knowing, not understanding this view of dependent arising, we develop this afflictive self-grasping, right? And then this is then, what is the cause of these afflictions?
Tati nga nachu ko dromji tan dordi ngotron rojirwa tati tesang kyotso na ngar chu ti lalendang ta nanchu tanda tanda kitso na tanda sanji ge demba she kana ja she wa te san kana yungu yometi kala ndwa chen shi
Okay. So this is just a very, of course, we're doing this, we're very quickly summarizing just this brief overview of sort of the Buddhist view of the world and how things work. And so also now what I'm going to do is explain a little bit about how practically this can work in society, in modern society, like what benefit can we get out of this?
this kitso na kangar kanden tri yometa so samlo tamba yana te sanda yo mangtu la so batindi kangar mombo tri yoro ki chanin zambole ki mi da mangtu lo tendala tindi mi kitso kangan trewa ane me ge susu yang samlo ko toni kangan tresa ta tindi kangar mombo ji tri yobi yores tiso sama kar ta ke demba she se ak dinga demba se atin on le ungo yores kangar sama zambole tri do.
So if we look at modern, please have a seat, there's water in the back. If we look at modern society, of course, we look around at the world around us, there's lots of war. Of course, there's many wars going on right now. There's lots of people suffering. There's lots of problems. And we can really look at this and understand that where is this, we think about where is this suffering coming from, and we can really recognize all of this great societal suffering really as a manifestation, an aspect of this truth of suffering that we're talking about. So, for example, locally here, of course, because of these wars, there's lots of places are running out of gas. Like we actually are not able to get all the kitchens and things here use these gas cylinders, right? And we're not able to get these refilled right now. Of course, this is a very small problem compared to the very large problems that many people are facing. But
di neo ge jakarti jakajamba jile te yobi dubsi jumse res jumse tanda jagar di jakabde jakajamba jile te yo ayinza te meba yinu di kanga biungo ma ta pa ke tensa tela kanga tio di kanga le yo
so this I brought this up because it's an example of how we here depend on other countries, right? So it's an example of this interdependence, right? Like we know here in India, the country of India is not independent of these other countries, and when these problems in Iraq, these kind of problems arise and really demonstrate how much we depend on the help and kindness of other people to survive. But this, of course, is really a very small, in the scheme of things, this is right now a very small problem, but this could become much bigger, right, as these wars and things continue, right? It's very possible that there are bigger problems that could arise.
Tin do yamba insa tin do yo insa ta chil kangan thi on di samal kangan thi yong yores teso garasina temba se ati gimse na so temba ya poji khale yamba ina ti kangar te so sama temba la tini chungu yoro ta ti ngene chungu to se thu yoro oh yeah.
And so also we can think back at the time of COVID, when COVID happened, and a lot of countries, because everything was shut down, a lot of countries also had a lot of problems, right? And so this is, again, it's just demonstrating how all of the countries depend on each other. And so then when a problem happens in one country, we feel the effects in the other country because we're all interdependent, we're all related.
So the thing is, kizo jibde da ya poji ta ki kangar ta ma me pa zo goyala ta ta ki kanga yongsa ki jit ko wara mantu yongsa jiro te mantu te me pa zo shawa ina ta ti kangar so ya sen ro was kangar tanda di kangar ji thedi ora ges me kangar ro pe ro ta ti kangar te me pa zo wala ta ki bage mantu to so me pa zo ro ta mantu ti yo na yang jo kangar thedi ro ta mantu ma ji ala te ni yungu yo was.
So if we look at our example of our small problem we're experiencing here with this sort of gas shortage, right? And where is this problem coming from? This problem is coming from these wars, right? Because we have this interdependence on other countries. And so if we want to fix these kinds of problems, what we have to do is we have to be able to stop these bigger problems like wars and these kinds of things that are really causing a lot of problems.
Jiwala nga tsupansi ten yoba di jarka tsama ki kilenji goris na chola jarka chola ten chonga la ten yoba ti kilenji na ta kilen yakpo cheba ina ten yona ani matri ma shindu gori ani suso pansi mi nesa tila ya shaza nyi jeche chigchila ni chola ten yoba de kinen bayena ta nga chola ten mago ani matis legi ro ta karache gore ni chola te chongala ten yoba de panze kinen jogo.
So what needs to happen is the countries, the societies need to really recognize, need to really understand that we all exist in dependence on each other, and that we all exist in sort of providing aid for each other. And as long as countries really sort of don't recognize this, as long as societies and people don't recognize this, and one group says, I'm alone, I'm the best, I don't need you, and the other side says the same thing, then there's going to be this fighting, and we're going to continue to have these kinds of problems until we really recognize, we believe this sort of deep interdependence.
Ta tindi ke khele yong goala na te ten goyo wala soso nga ra chupu gi jar zambalindi galan chotho samsam gi nga jir chiwa te ma te si chama to na ta ya nga tanda ge panse nga chola te yo ba te khele yong yo mara tindi so soso cha chimbo nga jar ka jin arin da wajin nga zambale ge top chishu di nga sa kana ten go me sam te pa jar ka chunjuli jarin ja pesha par na ta example pindo ende wayina da jago chinju to so ake yang pakele cheba yindo ari to chi yina yang mo ba kanga tesi
yeah, so for example, that as long as sort of countries or people and leaders who really have this like really great pride, and say like for example the United States right now, where it's like we're the best country, we're the strongest country, we'll do whatever we want, and are going out and just sort of not acting from a place of sort of interdependence, but acting from a place of really sort of isolation and pride and thinking you're totally self-sufficient, then we're going to continue to create large problems like this and sort of create fights and wars and things, and we'll continue to have lots of difficulty.
Okay, that tindi nga so ge tande namba ka son jawe gi gidan kem ge namja da temre ge namja te tslo lojong che bayena tandi ki chson ala tretia ke nga kanga tama seala nga so this yonde tene len to yores ti chu de maimba moyo ne tenge ta nga so la cha len yores tin sa tanda tin ge chso de nala tanda namba ke son ge demje ke namja te so na ripalena tindi yo do sinara samata.
So what I think, why I'm saying this is this idea that, in Buddhism, of course, we have this idea of interdependence and dependent arising, and there's a whole lot of sort of ways that this is taught in Buddhism, but you don't have to necessarily teach this through Buddhism, right? Like really just a basic recognition of that we all exist dependent on each other, we all, need each other's help and benefit from each other's help, and we're not isolated and independent. If we're able to take that teaching and spread it throughout the world, and not, it doesn't have to be a Buddhist teaching, it's really just a basic fact about the way things exist that we're not recognizing. And the more people recognize that and understand that, then these kinds of problems will decrease in the world.
Ta kiyong kichene ta temde ka navja sombala tene tindig shipcha chleando til ngarsu namba sanje be ma konsa choke songu yore namba jongo nolola nambi jongi tseri ta tawa ta ani nambi ki chusen de so songu do tanda ki temde ka navja ta so chuk kaja marise ngoy ne sir ka cha insa marzu ta chuk namba yimay la ma ti ngasu kayong yo ne te shade yore ta ya chu nambi ki chusen de an ko lalenje an do ka yong yore.
So His Holiness often, when he's talking about Buddhism, and particularly in sort of the sort of the world society, and talking with other people about Buddhism, he divides Buddhism into essentially Buddhist religion, Buddhist sort of philosophy or view, and Buddhist psychology or sort of mind. And this idea of interdependence is really part of the Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist view. It doesn't have to really have any strong connection with the sort of the religious parts of Buddhism, because really at the end of the day, it's just a recognition of the way things actually exist, right? So if we can just continue to develop that, then it'll be very beneficial.
Okay, tani tati Geshe sani, ja chonsani me gir soso ke yimba yina ya, gir soso chi nyable masi na sala tamba yina ya, soso chi panjo yinjo yina ya, je la tu mugosa mejala toncho de keso ma chebe. Ni cheba yina ta kanga te tesi ba jirwa. Ni me jamba so nyin kolo mila samba sambo che ya ta so. Ni nambe ki chu jam ni je sa samba sambo che ya jirwa. Ti yani chochini soso nyable cheba yina ta mesi na soso gel kanga chebi ki chi yorata.
Soso ke kanga.
Kanga mesi kanga cheba chi stress la wanda. Loneliness la udwa ke kanga tsona ya. Ta so le ya mi jala tu go samlo ke samlo ti yomba yina. Ti so ma jia ke sang yoles.
Ti
shambala ni jese
Che,
am
che.
shambala
Che,
tu
they do it.
다시 jakal tu yo ta ma gerina soso ke trobola tengo ba so go chimsi to never thing
Okay, so also what's really would be beneficial is if not only recognizing this view of reality, this understanding that we all exist, independent with each other, independence on each other, but then through the recognition of that, developing things like love and compassion and these positive qualities for the benefit of all sentient beings, right? So that you see, on the basis of this view, you're developing love and compassion. This would be really beneficial for society as well.
No trace na mando ta karsa basic motondo wache ti ta chitsona la kande jinga so la len che ko yo be ti kor chi gins ta ngar so twat len chi ba yin this there is in la ke chaka.
So this was just a very brief, quick sort of summary of some of my thoughts on Buddhism. I hope there's some things that you can take away from this that are beneficial or helpful. Now we have time for questions. If anyone has any questions, please.
When you're saying that we need to think about they're all dependent on each other, and we need to do no harm, and we need to we try to live together in a good way. But sometimes it doesn't work, right? So it's good. Maybe between even inside the family, it sounds very good because there is goodwill in everyone. Everyone in the family has good will, but sometimes it doesn't really work, right? But so you need to be more to understand each other in a better way and think in a better way. But sometimes especially in Western society, there's a lot of evil, right?
So
A lot of bad.
can you give a concrete example just to make it easier to?
If China is conquered Tibet, what Tibet should do? Okay.
Yeah.
If
Okay, yeah, so if someone's cruel or mean, what are you supposed to do? Yeah.
even between countries, we are talking about between
Sure,
countries.
sure.
Understand that over time, if we spread this attitude, it can help. But sometimes it doesn't work, okay, because I cannot.
Well, obviously it hasn't worked, right? Because
I
it's
cannot
just
affect
war.
Iran, I cannot affect
In the
China,
lectures,
I
yeah.
cannot affect all these big guys in the US, I cannot affect them, okay? And something happened, and also fights between religions, between Islam and Christianity, and Judaism and
Yeah.
So, and there's no way I can affect them. So what is the...
I need to try to restate your question in a succinct question. So I'm hearing two things. One, that sometimes people are just going to be mean or evil, right? And that what should you do in that situation? And the other thing that we can't really affect these wars and the sort of large groups fighting each other, right? Like these things are going to happen, right? So how do we respond to that? Would you see that?
Actually, it's the same thing, but in a different scale. Right?
Yeah.
So it's between me and my bad neighbor, or between my country and another country.
But the crux is you think someone's doing something evil or wrong, and how should you respond?
Sometimes there is an evil in the world, right? That's the problem. Okay? If everyone have some goodwill in their heart, so it may work. Okay, but what do you do when you don't see a way for it to work? Okay, because the difference between me and my neighbor, or between this country and this country, is so huge that you cannot affect it, not in a normal time scale. Okay,
Sure,
by the time you try to spread Buddhism, they will take over the country.
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah. 디 공기 경기 승부대디 배야포 삼기도 기내양 잠기lingi 낭나디 미카셰디 디 심나체니 디 저버체기여레스 디 참참디 김세기 콩라 직세나디 뚝작디 주퍼 뚝작 디 저버 뚝작 배 뚝작 체기여레 디 군농 맵디 야포 메나 양나디 참참디 디 di kola di gyokap jiki gyokap shinla di tsinzo chegiyore. Tetu di kerangi dawa dindre samotangna di pinto kariyore. Kerangi di dindre di champa tang ningje di nyamlun chena pinto kariyore. Kangi sana di simnak bogi mite so di kurwa chegi maris. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very difficult and deep question.
Tati ne ta tindi yungu yore sta kitang ge chuchol sale tamba yemanda tinga su ta zogum jen ro ji yungu yoro ta yena chochine sablo tani ta pena da be jami gitan ko peja so pe giza no jo pesha ba yena ta pe ge ya tele ya ji marso tapshi chini konsa chokar chone jiwi ke dwang su yoro ta jiwi dwang la yoro ta ngaso ba zia mai mo mela no valence yoro kese tin cheba yemba yena ta chonyu kanga de tele ya man receiver wa ta pe ngonio ramanda lingin ramanda ya janal mi mombo sia tapshi chimba yena ta ba de chongsha ko yona ya janal na ya mi mombo so shora la so paki ani kangar mombo ji tre yong yores ani ta jami ke na tindi ki chani ji pe sa ya la so pen cha cha ba yena ta merkel to korotson le ji jarkan ji top de yora yana ti jarkati ji ya tembo ji ma de korotson pa pebo ji gane sim lo debo gu jarka ji ma de ro jarka le so jarka.
So, of course, from the Buddhist perspective, really, anytime anything bad happens, you really should, just strictly speaking from Buddhism, it's an opportunity to practice patience, and you should practice patience. But that, of course, is very hard. And so, for example, we can look at the situation with Tibet and China, right? And so China invaded Tibet, and His Holiness, how has His Holiness reacted? Well, His Holiness has reacted by teaching this middle way, this way of nonviolent resistance, and sort of slowly working. This can be understood to be skillful because the truth is that if the Tibetans had responded with continued violence, it would have just created more violence on both sides, right? It wouldn't have actually been very effective from any perspective. It would have just created more problems for the Tibetans and for the Chinese, right? From both sides, it would just continue to create anger. So in that example, right, this sense of middle way is both a Buddhist response and a skillful response.
Chichani tanda ya michla chacha bayna me geji ki draw social dranda wo jibayna ta ti dratel ki chini je mata ni khepsan ji social ko pa midle chi se bayna ta nekap social khepsan ji ra bayna ta pa drat se chara chi lo debo chak mar yang dratla ya kyo ti chi se bayna drani sha char yo ko ki penja de dracha kyo charan teli jang nam to chi se ma to je na ma chli gra ya tanda te michila khepsan la yo de yang mi jamba ji kyola ta ti khepsan jarka yi chimbo lo debo jarka ji.
We also can think about it just from a more personal perspective, right? Say you have someone that's an enemy, right, that does something terrible to you, or for whatever reason that you perceive as an enemy that you don't like, right? And so if you kill that person, really what benefit is that, right? Your own mind from that point on will be disturbed. You'll have lots of thoughts. You'll be scared, right? Because, you've killed that person. Well, then all of that person's family, their cousins, brothers, whatever, they're going to want to kill you, right? So you're just creating more problems through that kind of action.
Tani ta nanchu ki nyamling ki toni sheba yemanda kari yemba yena ta susu ki chong karachi raba yemba yena sindali chong ji kheba yemba yena dikin dipu khesandi kiwa chama la ta khepsan ra yemba ta ta shor no yor ta nanchu ki jina susu mesindali mi susu ko so shor na ya shor chu shana teli yale ma jine she shaba yena tin dipu kiwa chama ta nanchu ki remba shi yora sindi marwa dikin dipu jimala susu diki yong yores ta tindi sablo tangto na ta nanchu sablo tangto de ya kese mato yemba yene tabshi ta ke temre ke se adi ke maso tab khibo chini paki de se shana ga gindu yana nyam de chambo chini ya maso kache shini kanga de ma se gindu sena ta kache shini kanga de ma se samba yena teni gyakha ji thoba na susu gyakha de tembo andi chi chao de.
So in Buddhism, of course, we're really talking about like what are the effects of our actions and really thinking about how these actions are going to affect us and affect other people. And Buddhism is also really, the more you're able to, like Buddhism, we believe in past and future lives, right? And so we're really often thinking about, future lives, like what are the effects of these things over many, many lifetimes, and what will be the effect of this in future lifetimes, right? And so from the Buddhist perspective, doing something bad has a very negative effect, not just in this life, but in the future. And so the more, from a Buddhist perspective, from a purely Buddhist perspective, you're able to think about this longer term, right, then this makes a little more sense. And so that's also an aspect of this perspective. Can you tell me what you say?
Digi mayimbe taki temri ke namja se nabi ke tsenri se ati. Ta ngaso tengwa mi kacha nyam de sheni. Draji ba yena ta ngani drati ma. Susu kacha toni kanga ta ma se. Kanga se ala tene susu jarka toba jiro. Ti jarka de tembo jirese. Jarka la na the one larko.
Okay.
So,
yeah, and so also again, just thinking about it from this perspective of this life and more sort of our present reality, like science. If you have somebody that perceive as an enemy, and if you're able to actually get rid of the problem and sort of solve the problem between you, then you both benefit from that, right? So that's also another way of understanding that.
So the first priority, I understand, trying to solve problems in a way of peace and patience and dialogue and everything. But what if it doesn't work? Okay, because if it doesn't work and you are not objecting the enemy, the evil, the bad neighbor that want your wife or things like that, okay, or whatever.
Well, you should take skillful means, but it depends on to avoid whatever problem you have. Kungi sungbakarri senati jiksinati dikangi ningje champa di nangchi namlan chena yeneang temase di kirangi jate kirangi jiksina kirangi gemin segire dinje or gemin ngai kirangi gemin segin double di lapkire karichigiri di kirangi kirang rangso di self defense conscious lapkire the self defense di conscious lapkire the self-defense.
Ala soso sonkyo.
Yeah, the nangshin chea degree right.
Ta soso ye de sonkyo chea de ta tam kibo jini ta gi kawa tingdo chi tapshi jindo ya sewa. Ti ta soso never nyamde chi kanga chea de nenga kawa chi tingdo. Chi jena ti gikindo soso la ya tingdo yo seba jiwa. Kun dini ba mi le pe karsana control gi mambo sa de na pasho de ya control yong sigirwa. Tini da soso ngoni salo chi kango yo re. Nge kandi chendo pasho de la. Ma do soso gi chenchi chuni masani pagi dige yong sigmarwa. Ta ti soso ku action dik kya che yo na ti soso ngoni ngolenche ne pasho apology se woro ya. Konse shiat to bure se.
Yini singbate samsam ti pento yomare. Samsam ti gongba chena di pento yomare. The mission of the ngoni cheni simla cheni the
Yonjun chigri se go. Ta ti nachu na la kanga den che on di chamba ya ta ti dradle tis khatra ta chik chig yor ta mi di mentong sa pa shu kya de ya na kyo di de ba kanga men ya chik so so khatra ne sa cha jamba la po mette tan dribo ma che ba yin ba ina ya ta shi yogi yor ta ta shi ya.
Yeah, I mean, from the Buddhist perspective, we talk really about sort of method or means, right? And so you should think about whatever means you can to avoid that problem, right? From the Buddhist perspective, really the first thing you do is really look at yourself and try to figure out how are you creating this problem, or how are you affecting this problem, are you affecting this problem, really trying to understand if there's something you can do yourself, right? So that's always the first thing you should look at, but sometimes it's true, that's not the case. Sometimes somebody's just got a problem. And then, so at that point, then what do you use whatever method you have to get away or to avoid this problem, right? You don't have to just sit there like an idiot and get hit. I mean, if you can get away from them, get away from them. Move away, get out of that situation if possible.
But can I also fight back or no?
Ta luckiness nzene ne. Ta ngarso tabshi ziyare da soso tabshi. Nzene kase se ta kiran nzene pasho to se to na kase ke se to chaja. Epa kase se mi de se to ba ina se ba chaja ro. Ani kepsan do ya. Te anju chi ta salo ta mo. Ta kyo tele yang kangar ji janka gu tum to si gora nse jel rogi chungro. Ta te phamlo yasu ji re do we. Ana te la trasana do ta te phamlom de soso ki kepsan salo ta ya.
So you really have to examine the situation and very, very clearly try to understand what is because you're the one that has to live with the results of whatever it is you do, right? So you have to really examine the situation and understand what is the potential results. If you fight back and kill that person, then, just in our hypothetical example, then maybe you're going to get in a lot of trouble, right? So you have to live with whatever comes out of this situation. So it's a matter of what is by really thinking about investigating and analyzing what is the most skillful way to get out of this that is of most benefit.
tamla the dictature is mi sia tabshi sia di ta basic se sabena ani social kanganre social gi panjor sama ya treora ti kanganre namal kanganre tinga so pel ngama yongyor dini ni ti se shabayna ni bot ko tabshi ti lamb the met ba sia tabshi che ta ti tabshi pe me pau le kanguni sama ro pau nguni na samla tani ti ka khepsan ka ti ti so ndo shabayna khepsan do
yeah, but sort of killing someone, right, as a means, as a way to get out of a situation is really a terrible, fighting, like the kind of violence essentially is what we're talking about, is really not a very effective way to get out of many situations, right? So killing someone, right, is going to cause you a lot of problems. It's not, and so at the end of the day, it's kind of like an easy, or even you could say cowardly solution in a certain type of way, right? The smart, the Tibetan word he uses is sort of like heroic, but it's like the really powerful solution is to really be able to be smart and analyze and find a way to get out of the situation that is, beneficial, that doesn't cause problems. But that's, it's not easy.
To the sego to the social the rancha yomar so control the zo yoris sego some the control the wangi ta ne the seja go some seja yore ta control the mai jita sona pachi joba ki la garda didi control the jita sona 당 조바 지그리 지게 들려요. 단 주마 송산. 디디다 쳐사 쳐사서. 이들은 더 삼고도 하나야.
So also just thinking about, right, in those kinds of situations, right, if you fought back or you killed someone, how much are you actually being motivated by anger, right, or desire for revenge, right? And of course, as much as you're motivated by these things, you're gonna do things that you're gonna regret. Is that helpful? I mean, the truth is that
I understand it's hard for him to say things that, okay, you need to fight back, but you cannot say fight back at all.
At the end of the day,
everything is to kill your neighbor. It's also to stop him. Okay, it's also to frighten him. It's also to make him think what will happen to him if he will continue.
I mean, at the end of the day, Buddhism is not telling you what to do. It's telling you have to live with the consequences, right? And so you need to think very carefully about what's motivating you and why you're doing it and what the effect is going to be. That's the thing, right? Whether you fight back or not, I don't know, right? But you're gonna accrue that karma, and your intention will help determine the karma. But you are going to live with the consequences of whatever you do.
So another easy way is don't be easy on the trigger. Okay, think about what.
Look at yourself first, right? That's what Geshe said, right? First thing is examine your own motivations, your own self.
There's also the story of Lord Buddha and the monk who was asked to go and learn how to clap with one hand, and that for me has saved me from many.
What was the story? The Sangegi Dojikire, what was it?
And it works for me.
Lakpa
The
Jiki.
teacher is teaching the monk to go and learn how to clap.
The Singebe. Sangegi Dojiki Nanga, the Gagin Jiki, the Lobchuk Tetsola, the Lakpa Jiki, Dup Gitap Dungiris. The Kugiving Akon. Yeah, I don't know.
It's the story, there's a teacher and a monk, and the teacher is asking the student how to learn how to clap. Go and learn how to clap with one hand. So he's off in the forest at his tree, he's not figuring it out, and then he thinks, okay, maybe this is it, and he goes back to the teacher, and the teacher says, go and learn how to clap with one hand. But the moral of the story is,
you can't clap with one hand.
because if there's no resistance, there's no...
I don't know.
Yeah. Quite easily figure out. And I think there's an intention behind it, because if you are the emptiness, then everything else just gets affected. So why, energetically, do people let the anger affect them rather than their peace affecting the
Yeah. The doti kung
when they're with
Yeah.
each other.
yeah. Okay, be double singular. The doti nga kung yung may the lak by jiki the tapa kung kogi be. Ang tinashin lak by tapa re. Lak jik dap tu kimare. The kung isangi gito.
그 페이지 요래.
예.
정말 잘라반이자 고래. 때 karla wiyore temri gore la
네.
la temri la salo dang manto la pa
네.
zik ten gore ndo sala ten gore
네.
tindi si jaw
So I don't know this, and Geshe doesn't know the sutra specifically, but it is an example. They use this as an example for dependent arising, which I think is sort of what you're saying, is that you can't, like, in order to have this effect, right? You need two things, right? And you can't clap with one hand because it's yeah.
If you're the space and you're containing the space,
Yeah.
then the aggression will fizzle out.
Yeah.
By the time it gets you. And it's a practice I've used a lot.
Okay.
I live in a conflict region.
Sure.
I don't know if I can speak.
Yeah, it's just as if you say a lot, I have to figure out what I'm going to translate. So the more,
I'll do it slowly.
well,
I
if you
grew up in a
succinctly,
community.
yeah.
I grew up in the UK, very cosmopolitan environment, I was born, but on my ancestors' land, they were divided and ruled by the British, and therefore they were separated by religion and language. Something that there was no separation before
Okay.
the British divided them and added it to the constitution to keep them apart, with the idea of getting them to fight each other while they step back,
Okay.
you know, reach the glory.
Sure.
So, I grew up in the UK, but at the age of 4, I remember asking the adults why they were fighting, what's going on. And the adults said to me, well, one's a Muslim and one's a Christian, and these differences. And I was questioning, God, that's very small-minded for an adult to think this way. So I had decided that adults are a bit,
Sure.
goofy,
It can be.
and I decided never to ask them anything again.
Oh,
But at some point, I did go back to Ireland, and I got involved with the peace movement.
Okay.
you know. But I think to be involved in the peace movement, we have to all realize our interconnectedness before, or
Sure.
within,
Sure.
because it's not without. Because
Yeah.
if you think you know, then you're only adding to the issue.
Okay. That's
And I worked,
The-
I did a lot for the peace movement to the point where my group of friends would storm at the checkpoint, we would storm at the walls.
I'm sorry.
because of this
Yeah.
enemy,
Sure.
fighting, which for me made no sense because we are
Yeah.
done at the end of the day.
So this is a question and answer session for Geshe. Do you have a question?
No, I would like to place the comment. I don't have a question. I've resolved a lot of it because of my experiences in more,
Okay.
more
Yeah.
details about how to act for peace.
That's
And it's an
that's
internal-
very wonderful work to do for
it's
sure.
an internal thing, and it does take time. And 20 years ago we were stoned at the wall, and now there's a checkpoint that's open, and people are recommunicating,
Yeah.
and old friends, but for both communities who were
Great.
never enemies, and that's
Yeah.
so we really have to look within us and remember that politics is a different game.
Sure.
We shouldn't
Sure.
politics.
Okay. 공기 승마디 로기 디스 마마 승성이 디자마 라기니 디 공기 파요라디 디 막중 디 카시게르디 시 디 첩시기 골라디 막중 디 콩소 슈퍼리 런디 강주니 슈퍼리 이니 공기 레가디 공기 미체기낭 라 공기 디 막중 데디 시데 디 레가디 mambo 체퍼리 이런데 카시 톱성이 디 공기 디 네가 기승바테 카레스나디 나초 믹세기 데와 당디 지 찹시 기콜라디 디 카레디 카카 디 로가 하고 그래서 그래서 디 찹시기 골람 나초 디 막충 디 투퍼각 망보 체계레스 디 티와 말에 디 Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful. Of course, this kind of work is really wonderful.
Incidentally, on the when you see that, you realize it's only the hands of some.
Sure.
Oh,
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's very nice. Thank you. Do you have questions? Yeah.
You're first.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask where the line crosses between Buddhism being a philosophy and when it's a religion. Like for
Sure,
me,
it's a good question.
I'm Jewish and like I love my religion and I will never like switch to another one, but I find a lot of answers in what I studied before in Buddhism.
Sure.
That it's harder for me to find sometimes in Judaism because it's just as different approach, like the way they explain things. So like as a philosophy, I would really like to learn. Like I
Sure.
want to do the Tushito one and everything, but I don't know, like in my own comfort, when it crosses the line to be a religious, and how do I know it's a religion and not a philosophy?
Sure.
Like some people say it's only a philosophy, some people say it's a religion, and so
Well, it's His Holiness that talks about this division of the three, right? The Dalai Lama. So he's the one who sets this up for people as a tool to understand, right? And Geshe has said that you can take whatever you want if it's helpful. But kung gitiwa karesa na di sang sa nangbe chu tang nangbe ta ju di satsam kawa yore. Kung isana kung gi yishu ichu jiu ichu yore. Kung la di dimbo kelang yore pento ki yore. Yene samsam kung nang chu lobsang chena teyang pento yore. Yene ngesama kung dis di nangbe chu jiksina di keling kung di kaditi di 직작다고 yore semsap kiores 강에서는 눈이 전에 공기 지오이 주케는 kiores. 가까송이.
또 디산소가레 세온디 잠바 남비 추 세야디 용디 잠바 특히 리짐르게 남자 세야라고 든디 송구요와 기왕아마 기와치마 또 기와치마 린딘디 제바이나 아니 기와치마 디벤디 맹게리스 딘디기 기왕아마 용구요레 송데야게 또서로와 딘디기 남자 킬렘 발랑아도 겸도 세야디 공요 겸도 메와이나 남바 용아 요마레 이나야다 뭐요 네츠르게 네탄 카시지 용거리 와다기 템르게 남자 세야도서 축가자라 말이 산지를 킬렌치고요 말이 맞아 츠르 잔이 나오지는 바잔을 기요레스 때낭에 츠르 잔용고 요스 아이스 땡 따라 잔이 is 이나 아이스 돌링이 대바 잔용 메스 이나요 티 잔이 따라 잔바인 소소 뇽티 랜도 배 캡상문에 뭐요 네츠 티 따라도 잔으로 맞죠 츠르게 따라도 잔으로디 츠르소 동게 아이스 나자라 니톤 세야 돌링이 kuzu tatusu jangderwa ina itilangi taba janyome taba jagoyo ina kuzu la te moyo ni serinza tin jitin tini naji jin kyoroto naturally ta lo janje pento yo na suzu teje
so if we want to really talk about what sort of makes how would we sort of say this border is, or when does Buddhism become a religion, or what is sort of religious Buddhism? What we would really talk about here is this belief in karma and past and future lives, right? That this belief that the karma that we accrue in this life, is going to have this effect in these future lives. And on top of that, we would talk about having refuge in the three jewels. So like the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, seeing the three jewels as the way to sort of get out of suffering, right? And so this is really what defines the Buddhist, we would say Buddhist religion, right? So it's taking refuge in the three jewels. If you take refuge, it sort of defines what being a Buddhist is, taking refuge in what we call the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. But beside from that, of course, there's many things, right, outside of that, right, that we can talk about the view of dependent arising, the view of emptiness, the sort of these things that really just describe the nature of existence, right, that we take study and practice, but that we can actually, have some experience with. And so, for example, I've studied a lot with Geshe. I've studied a lot at in Drebung, where we study science, and these scientists come and they study Buddhism, and of course they don't necessarily have faith or believe in karma and all these other things, but they are able to really study and benefit from studying the Buddhist view of the world.
semkang tseri baji samlo tana di tseri baji semkang tseri baji grindu di samadi demandwe di lobjong che so campaign na lenchana de yore.
So you can also, regardless of whether you're a Buddhist or not, and you said you're Jewish, you don't want to say you're not a Buddhist. One thing is to think of the Buddha as like sort of a scientist of the mind, right? Like, I mean, you can really sort of think of it and take of it that way. It's a way of working with the mind, right? So you don't have to take on these other aspects of Buddhism that are more religious.
Two questions.
Okay.
In this modern society, right now we have many tools like Gemini.
Like what?
Gemini.
Oh, German.
And what's GPT.
Mm-hmm.
So, like today, we ask the monk. But for my friend, many of them, they just ask Gemini.
Oh, the AI. Okay, Gemini. Yeah.
So for the Buddhism,
Yeah.
how can we have a good way to use this AI?
Yeah.
Because right now everybody first question, any question?
We go straight to
Ask
AI.
ask the
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's.
how can we do? And even now, like in Japan, there are some monastery. They have the robot. Inside is like a Gemini. So you go to the monastery,
Ask a-
robot monk.
Ask a robotic monk.
There's so many databases.
Yeah.
So in the modern society, how can we use this tool
Tools. I can use the tool.
in a good way?
Yeah.
Question one and
Let me translate it. I won't remember both questions. 그래서 공기 지와 당보디 가서디 Gemini 그런 경기에 AI 디 다운 텐상 미 몸보디 갑득 디 지오이나 갑득 AI 지와 단계래. 나디 공기 송바카레사 디 공기 기억합라디 was it in Taiwan or in Japan with the robotic? Japan. 니홍라디 공소디 컴파기 나라 공소디 Logmiki tangdiwagi AI ki chapa jagere robot ki chapa jagere mi kashi pakela yongna di chiwa dangi eres ini kongi chiwa ngani karisana ngazo tensang di AI di yore ngazo di kap kepo chene kanjis peju dangi
kar pechu tang karala
AI
pechu tang
AI di Gemini
chumina kan pechu tang insa
kanjis tap kepo chene kanjis peju dangi
kandi tam kene pechu sana karala ta
ngazo di
lobjong chia la uyore
di pinto yore ngazo di Gemini di nangshin
te pendo yaro ma lobjong chia ko ka sekin na samu
이 딩에서 디섭섭 제거래 저섭 제거 말에 그 인연가 딩에서 디 에 베주 당는 인연가 양면에
ninga ta di track de karanga di pang sila lobjong
yeah, I mean, I think he says, of course, it can be beneficial, but I'm not totally sure. Like, I think I'm having a hard time totally getting a question. He hasn't used it that much, I think, so it's not totally clear to him. But yeah, the not so the kengi samsula the mijiki the nangchuki chiwa yena kaptuk Gemini china the kandi kengi samsula the yapoyore yapoyoma.
yapo yode yo tesan karasena tan jemena luya di karchini yungu yore di namba ga song yonare sanji song de so mi ji ya lusha ra ta ga ya
이 딩이 chini Gemini the zuma shigere.
zuma shi ko ya lusha ro te lusha ne te mi ma so te pecho ta yoro te deblo wa de chi ban de chi mare ro ta ti ta ki sa na ji ni ti so 그 jemena le jam yo de so ta ta ren do ya ni
이 mambo the zuma shigere 그 하거기 말에 스티 공소도 이죠 제기래.
re ta ti so 그 라파 pecho ta ya re ti ne se ta len sai ji ku ta ti so ka le do ni jamba ti son jan jo de jamba ji la ka cha ti ya na deb gan la yo ta ka cha ti thung de
So I was sort of pushing back and saying, well, you know, people use Gemini and they're going to believe whatever it says and it's just going to lie to some people. And what Geshe said is, you know, well, yeah, of course it's useful. It's great. People ask questions. But if it lies, they should not listen to it because they need to think for themselves. They need to really understand and think. And if it lies, like if you were reading a book that was lying to you, you'd stop reading it. Yeah.
people just don't read any books now.
Yeah, I think the effect on society, we don't know. Yeah.
Especially the young generation.
yeah
Sometimes, because the Gemini already read, so it did. And so, in some way, if you want to get a quick, you have an issue you need to solve.
Yeah.
And you want to see the Buddhism aspect,
Uh.
try to solve this problem. So it might beneficial to ask the Gemini what would
Well,
a Buddhist will do?
Geshe's first reaction was, yeah, it's wonderful. It's a very useful tool. But I pushed back because I've used it, and it lies. It will just make stuff up,
Okay,
right?
so
I've seen it.
what you're saying it's not good enough.
What I'm saying is, for me personally, not in Geshe, it provides this appearance of being something it's not. It will answer any question you ask it, right? And so it will come up with an answer. It never will say, I don't know. And when I use it for translation, I'm amazed at how good it will give me translation or explain very obscure Buddhist philosophy. But I never know in that, if it's something I don't already know, I don't know when it's just making something up, when it's totally lying to me. Because I know when I ask it questions I know sometimes, it just makes things up. And that to me is the risk. Because it just lies to you, and you don't know, and it seems very persuasive.
So the concept is not bad, but not good enough yet.
I don't know. Personally, I think the danger is people will stop thinking, right? People will rely on it. I get worried about that.
That's a real concern.
Yeah. Their education, right? Their education is amazing. They sit there and memorize. They spend years memorizing these huge texts, right? And then they debate it, and they have this very structured debate. They spend 5 or 6 hours a day doing these really structured debates, going into incredible detail. It's all in their head, right? My education was all on paper. I can't remember anything. But the Geshes have this incredible education that's all memorized and in their head. And so they come out with these minds with these incredibly detailed memories and understandings of the path. And to me, the AI is the opposite of that. We're just going to get lazier and lazier. And that's what I'm worried about. That's like Geshe didn't say that. Geshe said, yeah, it's great. It's a tool, but I'm scared.
We are getting lazy.
That's what I worry about, personally.
Okay. Second question. Right now, some people, they are isolate themselves at home.
Yeah.
So like my friend, she barely go out. When she's hungry, she just use app, Uber Eats.
Yeah.
When she want to have a community, she just check.
Yeah.
What's your tea?
Yeah.
Don't need to talk to other people.
Yeah.
Don't need to really have a real link with other human beings.
Yeah.
So for the Buddhism, how to have any suggestion or recommendation for the people?
Technology is isolating them. That's what
소소소 주비 대학 그 kop시 mo
Think
mo
of
tepe nga namji samgre ti pe di chan yung yor karasina di trichi pamju yaji ruala teni merke soso ko topo de mogo samage gi samlo de te long yor ti panse temre za ka namja ka la ru yor ro ti so da ti lam nan du yo na ti na chona la mo bole ndo nam chomi sama chuku jibu de do pene jaga no yin bayna ta jaga sin
yeah, this is actually something I've thought of, speaking first person Geshe, this is something I've actually thought about a lot, right? This is something that I've seen that it's a real problem, right? Is that as this technology, as our power, as our sort of resources grow, we really sort of think, oh, we don't need anybody, we don't need anything, and we become isolated, right? And sort of it's really opposed to this this idea of what we were talking about earlier, this sort of interdependence of people, right? It really sort of kind of breaks that or provides the appearance of breaking that, and particularly in the West, right? In the West, and that is, of course, a big problem. Yeah. This happens a lot in the West. And sort of in contrast to that, we can look at India.
The 가서 님마 딜로지까지 트리즈라 교토디 마수 디 체르기 돈레 갑라 체질을 지켜져 tin도. 마수디 가르 나 초코 미츠 쭈부쇼 되긴도 콜랭 가르 자우스디 마마로 코토티 판조르다 트치기 조리스 마수 니 mombo데야데 타 마모베 쳐서 디니 차 그래서 콜레 jam도 팅문에다 테사 미츠 사마 디 카퍼던지 로토범 고야노 디니 모도 타팅 아츠 쳬솔로 집정 앞쳐다 들어와이나 망치와 쭈부데야라페 티 용비버스 티 가르스는 판지 뚜 고야케 나자 뇽니 로요라 근데 인산타 저 가시나야 야 쪽분염도 게모 게츠모자 다 자갈 마보다디 티 섬서 야보도 쪽분염도 the opposition to that. So could you they are sort of child.
So I mean, in India, of course, because in some ways, because in a lot of places they don't have the same level of technology and development. Like that's just not a thing here, right? In India, people have to sort of live on top of each other, whereas in the West, and as kind of technology and societies develop, right, it does tend to have this effect, or it can have this effect on people where they sort of seem less and less, they don't need other people as much, and they end up isolating themselves more. And of course, it's really terrible, it's really bad, right? I mean, it's really good to share society and to be around people and to be friends, to hang out with friends. Is that helpful? Is that?
I just wonder if for the Buddhism,
I mean, of course, the heart of Buddhism is love and compassion and this view of interdependence. So this is sort of opposed to that, right? Like, I mean, we want to practice love and compassion with other people.
because right now, even for some people think they just have like an AI partner. We don't need a real partner.
I mean, AI is new. They're going to get bored of that.
People also respond to me. They never get angry.
Yeah.
So it's perfect partner.
It's
Not
yeah.
a real partner.
Yeah.
For some people, for some
The
people.
AI gigi.
yeah.
Garok jabo de rokba de mena chimba gomare de mamut samatangeres. Kengi nangchu tangdewe di kengi samsuma de kan.
Tati nachu generation be dichando shak ta chamse za ta mi ba mi ke pargin thang da lakora. Ta ko pe chip dewa ina so semle topo nyam den roya ta tam chip dewa ke samlo ni da dorna da di chip dewa kanga ma yungu ge ta mas kanga de mo zingi mara. En topo nyam de de ni ta mid chip jil pe rin thang da yichin euro. Tili chi be ki chia yusaro.
Yeah, so from a Buddhist perspective, this of course is really bad because the heart of Buddhism really is this love and compassion, and we need to be with other people really to practice that, right? Like it's really important. And so as you isolate yourself like this, you're just really going to compound all of your sort of mental problems. Like it's not going to be helpful.
Right now, even in some countries, people just don't want to have baby.
Yeah, wow.
Because they're very isolated. So why need to have that? Right now in Taiwan, each couple have less than one baby. So our population is going down. Many Japan, Hong Kong, China.
Why is that in Taiwan and Why the number of kids is going down?
Yeah, for each couple we have less than one baby. I think it's 0.8 baby.
But why? Why people
Very
don't
good
want
question.
this?
Probably life.
Kids are a lot of work, man. Kids are a lot of work.
Okay, for some people they think life is suffering.
Because life is suffering.
This is a terrible world. Have a baby to here. It's like environment pollution. Everything is more and more expensive. So many wars. Why I need a new baby to come here to suffer?
Cost. I mean, the U.S. cost is quite bad. I mean, things are really expensive in the
This is
U.S.
one reason.
This is one reason.
And of course there are different reasons. Like salary is not enough. You need to buy a house. Everything is expensive. I don't know, China want to occupy us. Yeah, people are terrified. So many of these different reasons.
I also heard in Japan you can rent a friend to go for dinner with. So the isolation is also what is opposite. Renting all sorts of things, I find that quite unusual. You can rent a hug or rent a friend.
I think at least here they have movies. They have a movie, just rent a father.
Rent, yes.
Rent everything.
Rent a hug, rent it's a wonderful,
Yeah, you can see that movie.
You know, one thing about the AI and the Buddhism, actually, I want to say for me personally, I think the connection with the teacher is really important, like a real person, right? Because Buddhism, in any religious system or any ethical system, you have to, Buddhism in particular, it's the only one I have experience with, ask you to like totally change your mind and your way of thinking and get rid of self-cherishing and all these things are really hard. And if Jinamite tells you to do it, okay, cool. But if you have someone, a really teacher that can skillfully help you, right, that's a totally different relationship. That's partly what worries me about even online learning and stuff, right? Like I think it's really hard to change your ego to do these things. And if you don't have a skilled teacher, it's so hard. Even with a skilled teacher, it's hard. So I worry about like this in this isolation and going online and Gemini, right? Like there's something about having someone who's a teacher who can really help you. Even in science or whatever, anything. Like I've had 2 or 3 teachers change my life. Right? Not everyone, but a few have really changed my life. I wouldn't have them online. Yeah. So that worries me personally about where we're going. Yeah.
And maybe one more question.
Sure, if Geshe last time.
For the Geshe background, when you are in a monastery, you need to remember so many sutras. Long years, so many years. However, right now in Western countries, for the modern education system, some system, they believe to memorize things is not first priority.
Yeah, we thought it
Because
was,
right now we have internet, so for the young generation, they don't need to
memorize. Yeah.
memorize. You just need to ask a website or internet.
Yeah.
You need to train your mind in a different way, not a memorized way.
Yeah.
So for the
Yeah.
monastery education in the future, you think you will keep this tradition to memorize so many things for long term, or you will change to another kind of system to learn Buddhism or the monastery system, Tibetan monastery system.
Yeah, the Matu, the Lojong Chetangi, Karsana, Tabla Zimbachi, Tabla Zirindom, Lunzichi, to Natural Lojong Chet, Tanki Zimba Naji Mari, number some Sigma Lunzichi, Ticket Tonda data, Zijam Naji, Zijam, Yomata, some Logotani, Panzi Jivijini, Chibajira, Kindle, Susuki Robanyan, the Tibetsi. Then some Yamling and Alana take Lulu Jajon to some Tani, Siri Tonda, some Tani Yam Chigoinzo, but see the Sutas. And Karsana, the Chigurta.
It's important to remember too in their system, memorization is just the beginning, right? So after they do the memorization, then they go and they do this really in-depth debate, and they really, once they've got all the stuff in their mind, they go through and they really examine every word, right? So it's not simply memorizing and then being able to spit it back out, right? That's just the step is getting it into their brain, and then they go and they debate and they analyze and they think about and they really sort of through this different process, really examining all of these things that they've memorized, and then they practice it, right? So it's important to remember it's not just memorization. It's actually the bigger part of their education is actually this process of examining and debating and questioning.
Maybe about memorization, you cannot really debate, okay? The debate is the essence of this, okay? Without memorizations of the sutra or without memorization of the mathematics formula, you cannot really be a mathematician, or you cannot really be, you cannot really debate, because you cannot go all the time to debate. One word. And if even a pupil at school doesn't remember the
Their type of debate in particular very much relies, because everything is relied on understanding these very clear definitions. It's a very structured debate. It's not like an argument, right? They have it's a very structured debate system where they memorize like definitions and things, and they go through this whole process. It's really beautiful. It's really an amazing system. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, if you can't be like, oh, sorry, I got to go look up that definition online, right? Like that doesn't work. Yeah.
Religious people in Judaism
Do that? Okay. Wonderful.
They sit together and like kind of study, but it's actually like a kind of systematic debate. About the books about the knowledge and the study of it to have these kind of things.
Wonderful. Yeah, because that's
Really
beautiful.
like this background. I think it should be also not in religion kind of aspects. I think we should work with this in a lot of other places. Like in our school, they try to do it in some classes. This forum of thing of sitting together and having this kind of debates about the things we study. Yeah. So.
Right.
But you first need to know.
Yeah, you have to study.
Have all of the foundations to have this kind of meeting.
Okay, guys, I think
Thank you.
it's time to stop. Yeah, thank you for coming.
We could learn together and sit in the word synagogue, which is English.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it in Jewish.
Yeah.